conversation is one that I feel is really important. Most people know what sickle cell is, and most people know how it can affect somebody that lives with it. But there's not a lot of people that actually share the truth about having sickle cell trait and also experiencing symptoms that are very similar to someone that has full-blown sickle cell. So we're going to dive into that. Mwape, thank you so much for joining me. So this lovely lady is one of my authors, and we kind of got in touch during lockdown. We've been speaking since then. We're kind of like, would you call us like IG friends? I don't even know. I just feel like we talk all the time on IG. This is Mwape's book. It's a very interesting read. I would recommend anyone getting it. And it's all about your journey living with sickle cell trait, but actually having the symptoms of someone that has full-blown sickle cell. So I really thought that I wanted to get you on here because I think this is something that is not spoke about enough, and I know that you feel the same. So first of all, just kind of like tell me about your kind of background, your childhood, and that kind of stuff.
I was born in the UK, but then my mum is Zambian, my father Moroccan, and they met in London, as they do when parents are young and in love and just traveling the world. So that's where they were at. So I came about through that union, and my mum moved home to Zambia when I was 2 or just under 2 years old, and I was fine. Grew up healthy I was running about. I remember like being in the sun, being in the pool. My auntie had a pool in her garden. I remember just eating guavas, mangoes, granadella.
Come on.
Oh, hard food. And yeah, I was happy. I was carefree. And then when I was 5, my mom moved over to the UK, and that was where, the pain started.
So you only started to kind of experience symptoms and stuff when you got to the UK?
Yeah.
And what was the first kind of like signs that you were having symptoms? And did you always know that it was, like, did you always attribute it to having sickle cell trait?
At that young age, my mom had no idea what it was down to. I remember the triggers were literally the cold. The cold would get to my bones, and I remember I have mental images of still being bedbound and screaming and writhing in pain and stabbing bones in my pelvis. Was, as a child when you sit on the floor, my pelvis always used to have crisis pains, stabbing bone pains in my pubic area, stabbing bone pains in my arms and my legs, swelling of my stomach, the hand and foot syndrome, with the swelling of my hands.
So did your mom know that you had the sickle cell trait?
She knew, yeah. So she was told when I was born.
Right.
But they just told her the usual.
What year were you born?
1984.
Okay, so, okay.
So they told her here in the UK, in London.
So you were experiencing most of the common symptoms that a child that has a full-blown sickle cell has, like especially that hand and foot syndrome where you have the swollen hands and feet. When you were having these symptoms, these complications, just as a child, what was happening? How were you being treated? Were you being treated?
No, my mum was sent home every time she accessed the GP, and she was told that it's just growing pains. And she grew up, or she raised me feeling like I just had growing pains until I got to about 8 years old, and a neighbor who had full-blown sickle cell, an adult, she was in and out of hospital constantly, but she knew that I was always sick. And when she kind of started digging and we started talking a bit more, she said, "You have sickle cell." And I knew I had the trait, and my mum just said, "No, she just has the trait," and that was it.
And of course, we're told that, if you have the sickle cell trait, you'll lead a healthy, normal life.
Yeah.
And it's only, well, what do they say? What do they say to you?
Yeah, just that.
Just that.
Just that.
It's interesting to me because I know a lot of people that have the sickle cell trait, and although I wouldn't say that they've had like very severe symptoms, they do have some of like similar triggers. So for example, my mum has a sickle cell trait. If my mum has like her chest area is really sensitive, so if we go out and her chest is kind of exposed to the cold or whatever, she will be like unwell the next day. Just, it's just inevitable. It would definitely happen. The same with my brother. My brother always has joint pains, like all the time, and we don't, it's almost like because there's nothing to link it to, it just gets ignored. And then I suddenly, so the reason why I was so interested to speak to you is because it's like, you know, because I have the full-blown sickle cell, when I'm in pain, I'm in hospital, I'm getting painkillers and whatever. And so I sometimes wonder if, for example, with my brother, if he was really experiencing these pains and stuff, but because he didn't have sickle cell, it wasn't paid much attention to as much as it was to me, and that's within a family. Do you feel like you've experienced that just kind of from the system in general?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think the system, because on blood tests and especially the most recent hematology testing, the hematologist told me that because at the time of taking my bloods, he said everything looked normal. Whatever the ranges of normal are for me, I don't even know those ranges as well. And I've later found out that there are ranges of normal, but it could be lower than that. So I don't even know that, but he said, oh, you don't have sickle cell disease, so, you know.
Obviously, they say that you carry the sickle cell gene, but in actual fact, what I learned was that you do have a certain percentage of sickle cells in your body. Your body produces a certain percentage of sickle cell. So even though it's like, oh, you know, you don't have the full-blown sickle cell, they determine that by the number, as in by the percentage. So if you have a certain percentage or more, so like I know that my sickle levels are something like 98 or 99%, which they don't know how I'm still looking this fabulous. They don't know, but mine are like, you know, 98% whatever, and I think I'm one of those people where even though I have my sickle level is quite high, I'm still able to kind of just manage. Of course, that could be leading to lots of different chronic complications internally, which I can't see, so I'm not thinking about it right now. But for you, that means that you have a certain level of, you know, sickle cells in your body. Do you know what that level is?
Yeah, 37.4%.
Right.
So that's...
And do you know what is is it anything above 50?
Well, they said the normal ranges are between, my genetics counselor told me between 20 to 40% is sort of like considered normal. But then they said that I found out that there's super sickling variants. So there's 3 that are super sickling though. And so carriers who present with those could potentially suffer equal or equivalent to somebody with full-blown sickle cell or even worse, because it's super sickling. So I was like, whoa, this is stuff that we're not told. We're not. Even the general public don't know this.
That's the same, because even for me who, I have the full-blown sickle cell, didn't know that this was a thing until I started to kind of do more research, to, you know, blogging, writing books and stuff. I want to make sure that the information I share is accurate. And so me kind of doing that research is how I stumbled upon all of this stuff that we are not told. And it's just crazy to me, it's just crazy. So tell me then, you, as a child, you were experiencing this, no one really cared, you were just kind of at home, told that there couldn't be anything wrong, it's growing pains. As an adult then, how have things changed in terms of, are you getting heard by kind of healthcare professionals? Are you getting treated in a different way? Like what happens now?
I'm kind of I'm treating myself now, because I kind of know the basics of what to do. I know that if I'm in crisis, the things that I can do to kind of minimize the pain. I've kind of, in my 20s, I kind of knew that I'm like a bag lady, because I'll have my layers, and if I don't have my layers on, I'll carry them in a bag. So I look like a bag lady, and I don't care. I'm good with that. I'm happy with me. If you don't like it, well, see ya.
See you later.
Literally.
And are your triggers, what are your triggers?
My triggers are stress. I've realized that stress is a huge one. Cold air, cold breezes. Now that I've had recent crisis pains in my head and in my jaw and in my collarbone, I've never experienced anything.
So painful.
Oh my gosh. And this can kind of like be consistent throughout the day, where it comes and it goes, and it's not normal. And when they're telling you it's all in your head, it's like, I wouldn't make this up. Why would I want to be bedbound or not be able to do anything or not be able to enjoy my life? Because that's basically what you're telling me, is that I'm making it up. I want to stay indoors all the time. No, I have places to go, people to see.
How does that affect your kind of like mental health, being told that, you know, this is not real, it's all in your head?
I think it's all come to a head. Recently, I've had to just take time out of social media. I've not been as active. I've kind of checked in every so often, but even as an author now, I've had to just take time out because I got it all out there in my book. And then I started advocating so much and doing so much while I was so unwell that I felt that my body's not healing. I'm constantly getting sick and having other infections, but then it's affecting my mind where I don't want to go anywhere, I don't want to see anyone, I don't really even want to talk to people. I just kind of, but then I'm forcing myself to speak to my nearest and dearest because I need that, and I need them and they need me as well. But yeah, it's kind of made me, I'm not as bad as I used to be, to the point where I'd just disappear and nobody would know anything, whether I'm still alive. But I am taking time out to kind of just heal mentally, because emotionally, mentally, this has been, connecting the dots has been traumatic, but then going through what I've just been through and having all of them dismiss it and kind of leave me in head crisis pains and headaches consistently, to the point where I couldn't see, I couldn't function, I couldn't speak to people, because I'd be speaking to you and the next minute I'm somewhere else. I wouldn't know what I'm saying or what we were talking about. And that was going on from March 2020 up until when I went into crisis in June. And then June all the way till December, the headaches and the pains in my head and the crisis pains were on and off. But it was just, this was just another level of crazy.
Do you think, so you said, you used the phrase connecting the dots. Can we kind of like break that down? What do you mean by like connecting the dots?
Over the years, I kind of started looking back at all the times that I have suffered crisis pains and been in pain, or related pain in relation to my sickle cell trait status. I'd look at journal entries, diary entries, Facebook posts that I've posted, and it was mainly like when there was cold, when I was really tired, when I was stressed. And then I would be like, these stabbing pains in my bones are not a joke. This cold is something else. And things like that would kind of hit me, and it's like, whoa, but that pain is the same pain that I'm feeling now. And even with my back, I remember like as a child, I mean, at 5 years old, I'd never done anything to injure my back, and having my spine in so much pain, but not the full length of it, just certain parts of my spine. And now my spine is literally where my mum has to massage me almost every day for me to get out of bed, because, and sometimes even with that, it can take up to a couple of hours before I can move properly. And it's just, yeah, connecting those dots that this is what's been going on all this length of time, and I'm nearly 40 now.
Connecting dots between, this is the pain that I've experiencing, these are like my journal entries or the posts that I've been sharing, that, and kind of connecting the dots to say the cold, this. When did you actually connect the dot to, is this sickle cell trait, or when was you told that? Or because of course if you've kind of grown up being told like, oh, you know, you're going to lead a normal healthy life, was it in the back of your mind that, oh, this could be because it's sickle cell trait, or did you think that something else was wrong? Did you try and get a different diagnosis? Like, how did that come about?
I think when I was at university, I was a mature student. Gosh, was I 21, 22? So yeah.
You look so young.
Black don't crack.
Black don't crack. You was like, I'm nearly 40 now. I'm like, what?
I'm 38 this year.
Oh
so
my
yeah,
gosh, girl. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So connecting the dots happened for me when I was in my 20s, when I was 21, 22 at college, at uni. I spoke to my lecturer and I said, I've always suffered symptoms. These are the symptoms I go through. And because of having my neighbor, she was kind of like, she was the one that kind of told me, you know, this is what you go through. These are the symptoms that I present.
What was your neighbor? Who was your neighbor?
My neighbor in Leeds, Jean.
So
Jean
she
McKenzie.
has. Does she have sickle cell? Or?
Yeah, she has sickle
okay,
cell.
So your neighbor has full blown sickle cell. Okay, so your seeing what she goes through.
Yeah, and hearing her story. And then when I told her that, you know, I was roughly about 8 years old when we started having these conversations. And she said, you have sickle cell. And because her flat, I mean, my house always had to be toasty, where my mom and my brother would get sick because it was too hot for them. Yeah, I was good. I was fine. And that was me. I was happy with that. Always lay it up. I get hot quickly, but then I get really cold, and yeah, the cold.
I always say rather be hot than cold.
Exactly, and layered so you can strip it off. And whenever I go to her house, I'd kind of experience what they were saying as well, because it was like she had kids and has kids, and so I was good friends with her daughter. So I'd go to their house and it was boiling in their house, and it was like, wow, this is what Mom and Naeem are telling me about our house. And yeah, so she told me that, and I kind of had that in the back of my head, but because they'd always said, you know, they'd sent me home, so I never really went to the doctors unless I really had to. And that's how I think a lot of people that I've spoken to with the trait seem to be, where they kind of, and again, the pain is kind of minimized as well, because it doesn't seem as bad or as frequent as someone who has full-blown sickle cell. Yeah. But mine was frequent. It was at least yearly. Where I'd have crises, but I'd deal with it at home because that's all I knew to do.
So your neighbour who has full-blown sickle cell, in conversations with her, kind of alluded to you that it sounds like sickle cell as well. So how are you now treated? Like you mentioned you manage your pain at home, but like how do you, because obviously we get like, okay, repeat prescriptions, painkillers, etc., because they expect it. But because you have the sickle cell trait, how does your GP, or are you seen by a hematologist? Like what is the level of care or treatment that you get?
Thankfully, I mean, the care that I do get is better than it was, and I think because I ended up having these stroke symptoms in December 2020, and they're still ongoing now, but there's a query diagnosis. It's not definitive. It's not a definite diagnosis, and because I've had neuro problems, I've had my whole body just went upside down. I've had to see gynecology as well because I started bleeding from my period stopped, and I know that's because my hemoglobin levels were low for me, even though they didn't kind of seem low at the time that they did the test, but there was a delay in the testing for 5 weeks. So I just feel that impacted on me, and that's always seemed to be the case. So now I'm under strong pain relief, which is fantastic. I try my best to manage with, you know, as holistically as possible with everything. Herbal remedies, as well as medication, as well as heat, as well as hot baths, Epsom salts, and you know, those things that we do. Yeah, definitely the good stuff. Yeah, so that's basically how I treat myself. I just do what I have to do because I have to do it, and they're taking so long to kind of get me in, which I understand. There's people with chronic conditions that they recognize, and so because of that, you know, I understand. So I wait my turn.
So good little girl. So you're not currently
under hematology.
Under hematology.
He dismissed me. He said because there isn't. He kind of knew that I suffered symptoms, and his diagnosis in the letter that he's given me was, I wish I brought it now, but he actually said to me that it doesn't sound like sickle cell because it's so frequent. But how does that make sense? And then when I told him, watch our videos, watch us speaking about what we go through, and we're all experiencing very similar, if not the same symptoms. And if you look at someone with full-blown sickle cell and they're explaining their symptoms to you as well, very, very similar. It's not, and then there's nothing else wrong with me. So what else? Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So it's just, okay, you know what, forget them, in the most respectful way. The ones that want to help me, you know, I'm willing to help. I'm willing to tell you what I go through. You kind of tell me your point of view, and if I agree, I'll agree. If I disagree, you know, I'll respectfully do it, but I'll tell you what I know through growing up with this pain.
Have you had any kind of healthcare professionals, doctors, whoever, that have listened to you?
Yeah, the ones that aren't treating me. I've had, in fact, neurology have been phenomenal. Gynecology, the last gynecologist I saw was amazing, amazing person. And it seems, this is already in my book, so I don't care if it sounds racist, but it seems that the whiter the doctor, as in white people from Europe or the UK, saying that Greek origin, they seem to be really clued up on sickle cell, which is fantastic because they have that, they have a lot of instances of sickle cell and sickle cell trait in Greece and the Mediterranean. So I've found that over the past couple of years, I've engaged with a lot of people from those sides of the world as well. They're fantastic. And they kind of class me as if I have sickle cell. And even with my query stroke symptoms and the current ongoing issues that I've been having, my neurologist said it's possible that I'm even having, query continual silent strokes or mini strokes.
And that is something that I know that it's kind of common in children with sickle cell, then it kind of becomes less likely. But once you get to the age of 35 and up, it's kind of the likeliness of that happening to people that have sickle cell and stuff like that increases again. So again, there's things. I obviously, so I've invited you on like conferences or wherever I can. I've kind of like brought you to the platform because I feel like it's just important to be shared. And I understand that when it comes to kind of research and things, because it's exactly how it's happened with sickle cell, they're not going to have the evidence or the answers to all the things you're saying unless somebody decides to take it upon themselves to do the research in that area. Do you feel, first two questions, do you feel like enough is being done in terms of finding out how common this is? And do you feel that you're either supported or that sometimes people that have full-blown sickle cell, that community, are against you in any way?
I'll answer back to front if that's okay. So I used to feel like forums with warriors, if that's okay to use as a term, so warriors with full-blown sickle cell, I used to find that there was a lot of resistance or kind of almost like pity, like, oh, sorry that you suffer, but and then it was kind of move on next. And so it was the focus, and I 100% understand because sickle cell in itself isn't recognized, treated, given the respect that it deserves and the acknowledgement of the severity of the pain and potential, life-threatening complications. So with the research kind of telling you that most cases you'll live normal, healthy lives with just being a carrier, it's understandable that we've not understood, that there is a potential severity in having the trait as well.
Exactly. It's that term, most cases. They haven't like definitively ruled it out. So it's almost like they know, like in any situation, anyone that has a sickle cell trait. I even have a really close friend of mine, she recently had a baby and her child has a sickle cell trait, and she was told, in most cases, or usually they'll lead a normal life. So that means it's almost like they know, but they don't know enough to be able to say. But in the same sense, they won't listen to or acknowledge what you're saying.
Yeah, I have found, trust me, it's literally so frustrating. But now I think I'm in a better mindset not quite a full 2 years later, but 2 years from when I went into crisis, but from having the stroke and then the other complications. I mean, I was bleeding for a whole year, which is why I was under gynae when I started my period again in September 2020. But it stopped. But the things that were falling out of me, that was not a normal blood loss. It was scary.
Have you ever had a blood transfusion?
They've never transfused me. They've never really checked my levels, and again, because I never knew to push, now I know.
As in your hemoglobin levels to see if they're lower or right.
I never knew that was a thing. I never really, because I've suffered 2 pregnancies, and again, the complications that I suffered then, I nearly lost my life in the second one, and I lost so much blood. But again, the slackness within I've experienced great care before in the NHS. I've experienced really poor, shocking, horrendous care. And the last time, that was a 7-page A4 letter that if I'd been in my right mind and strong enough, I would have complained and they would have owed me, I don't know how much money, but they'd have had to pay
I think they've got, there's payouts pending for a lot of people living with sickle cell. Just I think probably pending just for black people in general.
Definitely.
Because the care is just atrocious.
It was non-existent. I didn't get checked out before I left. And so the week when my midwife came out to see me after I'd lost my child, I had to deliver him. I was in labor for like 5 days and he fell out of me, but the blood was pouring, just pouring. I lost over 1,300 milliliters of blood and yeah, I'm light skinned already. I went whiter than this wall behind us. My face was so white and I looked really sick, and that's kind of something that my mum would know. My complexion's off, I'd get clammy, really anemic looking. And she says I've experienced jaundice in the past, but she can't really recall the exact instances, but I think that's how my complexion goes, is when I'm anemic, I go really pale. And so yeah, they never checked me. My midwife called for an emergency appointment when she realized how much I'd lost. She said, "You need to be seen now." And that was it. I can't remember the specifics of what happened after that, but that stood out. And I was at home and she made sure I had an urgent appointment. And yeah, I was still going through crisis pains in my pelvis after delivering, but I never figured out that was what it was until it continued over the years.
How are you now? Like today, let's say?
Today's a good day. Today's a good day, and I'd say most days now I can wake up and smile and it's genuine. Before it was always a mask, considering we've been wearing masks anyway the past couple of years, but it's been literally that I've lived under a mask for years. I've lived under a muzzle. I've kept quiet about my pain. I've never really shared. I've never allowed anyone in. Even in relationships, I've never allowed guys to get that close, that they'd see me in pain or they'd see me at my weakest. I'd class it as a weakness before. Now I feel empowered, that I'm able to talk about it. I've been given a voice and I'm grateful to you. I have to say that because you allowed me to be heard. When we met, I'll say in brief before, you know,
when did we speak for the first time? I can't remember.
Last February, when you were on a webinar, was February 2021, after I'd had my hospital admission, and I asked a question about, I think Dr. Maisha, Dr. Austin were on it, Dr. Kim Smith-Whitley.
Oh, I remember.
That one, Understanding Sickle Cell Trait. I'll never forget that date. And I think it was roughly about the 13th or the 15th of February 2021. Yeah.
It was the 13th. Yeah. It was the day before Valentine's Day, I remember.
Yes.
I remember exactly. Okay, yeah, I remember that. So you was, no, I was I?
You were
I think I was moderating, hosting, kind of. Okay, so you were watching.
I was watching, and I asked questions about the stroke symptoms I was having, and Dr. Maisha said, yes, it sounds like a stroke, you know, especially if there's still ongoing limb weakness and all the other symptoms that I was having. So physically, I've still got the limb weakness. The right side, the leg is stronger than my arm, but there's something definitely wrong. I can do a fist completely with that. This is me actually trying to do a fist. I can't, and I have to really think if I want to do something with my arm that requires strength. And I'm right-handed, so I'm like a child asking my mom, "Can you open this for me? Can you do this?" It's one of those situations where it is what it is.
Is that also, do you think, a little bit why you don't kind of let people in? Like you just kind of keep everything to yourself? Is that because you feel like you've had instances where you're just not going to be believed, or you don't want to? I don't know, you don't want to keep kind of going on about it, or do you think people won't listen?
I think it's a bit of both. I think because there's not really been that awareness in the past. Now I do mention, you know, I have a blood condition, but I'm still figuring out how do I explain it, because I don't have sickle cell, but I present like I do. So my body's just, it's not normal. It's not what's classed as normal. So yeah, it's just a bit of everything. I think that stigma is still very real. And it's just, how do I navigate out of my way around the stigma, but yet still acknowledge that, you know, this is what I have gone through. It's real to me. And it has been a disability, you know, in so many instances.
Well, sickle cell is. I know a lot of people, you know, it's debatable whether people want to class it as a disability or not, but I know, like, there's been situations where I am a disabled person. Like, I can't walk, I can't move my arms, I can't feed myself, can't clothe myself, can't bathe myself. I feel like, as someone that has full-blown sickle cell and has had an array of complications, and then meeting you, speaking to you, hearing your story, I have almost experienced like a backlash from like, you know, the sickle cell communities and people who have sickle cell, as to, you know, towards people that are symptomatic with the sickle cell trait. And you are just one of, I would say, probably like 6 people that I've spoken to recently, where it's almost like you speak and then they're like, oh my God, yeah, well, I get that too. But everybody keeps it quiet because it shouldn't be possible. It's not a thing, it's not real. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to be believed. And I also feel like it's almost like a competition. So sickle cell is so under-researched anyway. It's like, first of all, we don't have enough research into full-blown sickle cell. And then here comes you with the sickle cell trait one in research. How are we going to share this? But I think as a whole, it's just something that I wanted to bring more attention to, because I think it's important for people to just be aware of this. And I also think that it's really unfair that you guys are silenced because healthcare professionals will say, you know, oh, it's probably nothing, or, you know, it's not a common thing, even though they're not ruling it out. So I hope that, you know, more people can just feel freely to speak about it or whatever. What do you want to see change kind of for the future?
I think sickle cell as a general term, to kind of be more inclusive to the trait as well. I think that if we unify our voices together, I mean, unification is power. Our strength lies in that unification. So if we unify, because like you said, we carry a certain percentage. So how on earth, and you know, I was told that 37.4% is a high percentage of sickled, you know, abnormal cells. So if I have a certain percentage, how am I not diseased or have a condition? How does that work?
Right.
Ultimately, and we're still taught in, you know, the Sickle Cell Society sent me, I don't know, in my book, I kind of had to post about the email they sent me and the advice they gave me. They said, these are what I give my full-blown sickle cell patients. So if they're giving that to me as a trait, well, how does that make sense? How are you dividing who and who to give this to? You know, it doesn't make sense. So ultimately, if we're taught there are instances you need to be careful of, you need to avoid certain instances, high altitude, you know, dive in low oxygen area, high altitude areas where there's low oxygen levels, anesthetic, which I experienced, that's another issue. So all these things we're taught, but then we're untaught it at the same time by the same people.
By the same people, exactly. Because if there wasn't an issue, then why do you have to be mindful of all these things anyway?
Sudden death in exercise, I was very sporty and then I'd pay the price for it, but I never knew. So pregnancy, another issue, people don't know.
It's almost like the education, or the way that they educate, it's almost like about re-educating everyone in terms of 100%. The scope of sickle cell and what's included. I'm all about education and awareness anyway, so y'all better be listening. It has been so beautiful meeting you in real life, having this conversation. Do you have any questions for me?
I'm just so grateful to you. If you have any research projects that you need me to assist with, I am there, sis. I'm there for sickle cell trait, sickle cell. I will help as best as I can. You know, I'm just honored to meet you. I truly appreciate you.
Aww.
I really do. And that's why I have tissue.
We're not crying.
Yeah, no, I'm trying not to cry. I feel really elated to meet you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.